My name is GiBi, this is Toto, and welcome to the Horror Homestead, where I've solved one of the longest running FNAF mysteries. And nobody cared. As someone who's made it my job to study the FNAF lore, as well as the community myself, I think that this mystery is a very good example of mysteries that people don't look at correctly. It's a great example of how people deal with having limited information, and then how incorrect conclusions ingrain themselves in the community because they've been around and believed for like 10 years. So today in this video, we're going to talk about the Afton criminal institution that never was. But before that, I need to talk about my new merch drop. That's right, you too can get yourself an amazing Atari 8500 hat to celebrate your love of vintage video games. You know, those old arcade games you used to play in Freddy's in the 80s. Or if you're more of a Henrendo guy, you can get one of my Henrendo Entertainment System hats. I prefer the Super Henrendo Entertainment System, but it's fine. I also got new shirts. I went to Hurricane, Utah, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. There's a version with and without blood splatters. You should know that I've been selling funny Scare Bear shirts for a while. This one features the box art from the Atari 8500. Boom! Now we have a shirt for the sequel. Funny Scare Bear 2 for the Henrendo Entertainment System. Of course, depicting the classic box art where he says, "It's a me." A lot of people don't know this, but Funny Scare Bear 2 is actually just a reskin of Doki Doki Literature Club. All of these items are on the GiBi Fourth Wall store, which is always linked below in the description. And with that, we can move on to solving FNAF lore. FNAF is not a mystery to be solved or a math equation where if you just remember the right formula, you can FOIL out the correct side of the equation. Five Nights at Freddy's is a narrative. It's a story. And narratives, books, movies, video games, etc., are supposed to convey information as they go on. FNAF specifically likes giving out information that's intentionally misleading at the beginning of games, and then at the end, it recontextualizes all the information that we learned up to that point. For example, FNAF 1 leads you to believe that the animatronics are not possessed and just get a little quirky at night until we learn that they are. FNAF 2 makes you think it's a sequel until we learn that you're actually the victim of the Bite of 87. FNAF 3 doesn't tell you that Springtrap is Purple Guy until the final cutscene. FNAF 4 is the most confusing, and it's still an uphill battle to explain all of it, but at the very least we can say that when you play the game, it leads you to believe that the nighttime gameplay segment and the daytime gameplay segment are being experienced by the same scared child, when now we know that they're not. And you can also argue that you're supposed to think that the crying child is the puppet, but then the end of the game tells you he's actually Golden Freddy. FNAF always did this, and that's a problem because the franchise isn't just confusing and full of very heavy aberration, ambiguous lore, it's also a problem because it's intentionally misleading. When I say problem, I don't mean that it's like bad, I just mean it's like a problem for if you're trying to solve the story. Not only is it intentionally misleading, but a lot of theorists will also unwillingly take a lot of things out of context. Out of the context of when they're told to us. If at the beginning of a game, we're told that the ventilation in the FNAF 3 location is bad and you might start hallucinating.
Look, this place will give you the spooks, man, and if you let that ventilation go offline, then you'll start seeing some crazy stuff, man.
People might take that at face value and say that the phantoms are just hallucinations. Whereas I think by the end of the game, it's pretty clear that they're supposed to be actual phantoms. They're supposed to be actual ghosts or agony manifestations. But you can still use that original quote to try to prove that they're just hallucinations because technically the game said it, even though later I believe it's recontextualized. Another great example, in the first Scott Dacco interview, the answer to the question of which ending of FNAF 3 is canon was said by Scott to be interesting and complex.
Which ending really happened?
I've given a lot of thought. The answer is very interesting. The answer is complex.
Okay.
However, I'm not going to answer it because it's only going to cause strife. I mean, you see the kind of trouble that erupts, especially several years ago. The flame wars that would go on over Mangel's gender, something as simple as that. You know.
yeah.
No, I don't think I'm going to answer this one. I'm afraid.
Looking at this piece of information today might lead people down different paths trying to interpret what Scott meant. Which ending, if either, if not both, is more likely to be canon based on Scott saying that it's complex. The problem is that Scott's words were not meant for 20-25 ears. They were meant for people back when the interview took place over 6 years ago. This interview happened before Molten MCI was fan consensus. It's very possible that Scott's answer to which ending of FNAF 3 is canon, which is that the spirits were removed from the classics, which is the good ending, but that doesn't mean that the spirits moved on, because part of their remnant is inside of Molten Freddy. Because the community hadn't figured this out yet, Scott didn't want to just tell us. He knew that if he said, the good ending is canon, people might be confused and think that the kids had moved on when that's really not what happened. And so he just said the answer is interesting and complex. But now that we've figured that out, his statement that it's complex is out of context. It was complex until we figured out the answer. Now it's widely understood. If people try to use that complex quote today, they might say to themselves, oh, it's a complex answer, so it's even more complex than Molten MCI, which it's probably not. So I want to rewind to a time before Sister Location came out. I bring up other examples of other mysteries because I want to point out how important it is to remember why Scott plants evidence when and how he does. He says it because he wants to push us toward a conclusion, and the problem with that is that sometimes we reach the conclusion without it, leading these hints as vestigial elements of lines of logic that are supposed to get us somewhere. We see signpost A, we miss signpost B, and we get to the conclusion. And then we look back at signpost B and say, this must be the start of a brand new mystery. When really it was just put there because these puzzles are sometimes easier than we expect them to be. So let's talk about the source code of Sister Location's website. Scott had previously hidden clues in the source code of his website and in images and teasers for previous FNAF games. And so before Sister Location came out, if you went to Scott's website and you hit F12 on your keyboard, you would have been able to see the source code. Source code is like what creates the layout of a website, and so you go in and it'll be like, header, this text, at this size, in this font. But then among that code, you can just kind of put in other words that don't actually affect the layout of the website, and so you can hide secrets there. And Scott hid secrets there. This was discovered. We see Client Directory 1. A directory is like a table where you look something up, like it could be an Excel document, or it could be like a path down folders, or in like the real office world, a directory could be like a phone book, like one of those like rolly things. Put a picture of a rolly thing up, thank you. Basically, we have 3 directories. So directory 1 is going to lead you down like contact information and important files for that part of the company. 2 is going to lead you down that stuff for that part of the company, and 3 is going to lead you down that stuff for that part of the company. So the client directory number 1 is for Chica's Party World. It has a folder called Birthday Accessories, which then has a folder called Novelties. It's likely that this is here because there is no Funtime Chica, and Scott knew that people would ask where she was, so, in the source code of his website, he just kind of hinted at that Chica has her own location, that they are, like, associated somehow with the sister location with Afton Robotics, and that they're just kind of, like, over there, right? One of the things I always say is that small evidence leads to small lore. This is just answering why Chica's not in sister location, because she's off having a side adventure. Client Directory 2 is Private Birthday Booking. So this would be the main thing that Afton Robotics is doing in the circus location section. Circus location? Baby location. So this would be the main thing that Afton Robotics is doing in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. They're renting out the animatronics for kids' birthday parties. And so we have birthday booking, children entertainment, birthday props, novelties. Again, just showing us what the actual purpose of this location is. Then we get to the third client directory. Client Directory 3, CRMN_INST project. A mysterious third thing that the company is doing. Contacts, informations, folders, and files about this third aspect of the business. Their 3 primary clients are Chica's Party World, its own rental service, and then CRMN_INST project. What is CRMN_INST project? Well, the most common thing that I see people saying, and this is going back to when the game first came out, is that this is shorthand, this is an abbreviation for Criminal Institute. Before Sister Location came out, and before we actually knew anything about the game or the story, trying to solve this abbreviation seemed like a good way of getting a hint as to what the game was about. The problem is, now with hindsight we can see, that this was impossible to solve before the game actually came out, but people tried anyway. I talked in my Midnight Motorist Mound video about how people are primed to see certain things based on the way that they're shown, based on the context that they're in. So you're more likely to think that a clump of pixels is a shallow grave if it's in a lonely, secluded part of a forest during a rainstorm, even if that's most likely not what it is. And I can see why people are very likely to think that CRMN_INST means criminal something, Criminal Institute, when they're looking at behind-the-scenes information about the business dealings of William Afton, the murderer. But to this day, no Criminal Institute has ever materialized in the entire FNAF franchise. The closest thing I've seen people claim is that it's related to the criminal database that the toy animatronics had access to, but with the full context of what the Funtime animatronics are, this just seems very unlikely. The toys were designed with access to a criminal database so that they could tell if a criminal walked into an active Freddy's. The Funtime animatronics would not have access to a criminal database because they were created by Afton to steal children. And it wouldn't say database, it would say institute. What is a criminal institute? A more likely answer, in my opinion, is crewman installation. This seems more likely than criminal institute because there are crewmen in sister location. We see 2 of them, and they die. And if there's crewmen on site, they are likely to be installing something. So maybe they're installing something nefarious. And is there something nefarious in the sister location bunker? Of course there is. The scoop.
Elvis first, done got scoop.
But if this is crewmen installation, it's not something that's ever mattered to the story after this point. This was one of our first looks into sister location, and yet if you play the game, there is no crewmen installation. Like, even Chica's Party World, which is something that we never got an answer to in sister location, was later answered in FNAF 6 when we found Funtime Chica, and yet we've never found some sort of crewmen installation or criminal institute. When you're designing puzzles and trying to communicate to a player in a video game what to do, it's good form, it's good game design to have multiple branches that lead down to one conclusion. Let's imagine a video game like Breath of the Wild. If you want the player to climb to the top of a hill, but you don't know what direction they're going to approach the hill from, you have to put indications that they should climb the hill from every direction. Maybe one side will have obvious stairs showing you that you should go up there. Maybe one side will have an enemy camp so it draws you closer, and once you're there you see scaffolding leading you upwards that indicates that you should climb this hill to see what's up there. Maybe from one direction you're actually starting from a higher hill so you can already see that there's something interesting on top of the lower hill. And maybe from another location there's just a sign that says, "Cool hill ahead." So if you walk up the stairs, you'll see something cool on the hill. And then you climb down the other side, and then you see a sign that says, "Cool hill ahead." Your thought should be, oh, this is a sign pointing me in the direction of the cool hill that I would have seen if I came from this direction. But sometimes it seems like FNAF theorists, when solving a mystery, will solve it the hard way, and then when they look back at the vestigial elements of the clues leading to the conclusion they already got to, they'll think it's a signpost leading them to something completely different. Instead of saying, "This is a signpost we could have used but didn't need, I'm glad we solved that," they instead say, "This must be a super duper secret hint leading to something even more hidden. This signpost is Cool Hill ahead. That must be pointing to a secret invisible hill. It can't be the hill I was just on top of, because I already used all the evidence I needed, the staircase, to get up there. So this must be hinting at something even more hidden." Sometimes FNAF theorists are playing chess on Scott's tic-tac-toe board. So when we see this as a yet unsolved clue, not as a new starting point to a new mystery, like a criminal institute, but instead as a piece of evidence towards something that we already solved without needing it, we can pretty easily solve what we were supposed to get from this information. Now, to be honest, I don't think that this was able to be solved before Sister Location came out. I actually don't think it was able to be solved after Sister Location came out. I think we had to wait for FNAF 6. But that's fine, because I don't think that Sister Location itself was solvable until FNAF 6. Until we saw the blueprint for the scoop, I don't think we were actually able to understand what happened in Sister Location at all. The scoop in Sister Location is shown to be this big claw thing that smashes apart the Funtime animatronics. It's hinted that it's breaking them apart to get to the children that are captured inside of them, and then afterwards the robots have to be rebuilt. The scoop exists in the story to tear out Michael's inside so that Ennard can go inside of him. So then it needed a justification to exist, and that justification is that they use it to break apart the animatronics to get to the children inside of them. But FNAF 6 recontextualizes this. It tells us that the scoop is a Remnant injector. It's a scalable creation of ulterior presence. It injects different amounts of Remnant into things. That's what scalable means. Remnant is ghost juice, so that's what ulterior presence means, ghosts. So the mini-arenas only need a little bit of Remnant to come to life, but Ballora needs more. So the scoop is able to scale the amount of the ghostly presence in each animatronic as it's injecting them with Remnant. The blueprint also tells us that some Remnant is always left on the scoopy bit. This explains to us that when Mike was scooped out by the scooper in Sister Location, there was Remnant on the end of the bucket. So he was injected with some Remnant, which might be how he healed, or might be how he was able to commune with some of the spirits to learn what William was doing. This information is what eventually helped lead Theorists to Molten MCI. That's the fact that the Funtime animatronics were brought to life with the Remnant from the MCI kids. The Remnant was extracted, divided up, and then injected into the Funtimes to bring them to life. That's what William was doing. That's been his plan all along. His plan was to bring technology to life using Remnant in an effort to resurrect his children. But to do so, he needed more kids, so he sent out his child kidnapping bots. And this plot is impossible to put together until FNAF 6 basically spells it out for you. Which is fine, because FNAF 6 was the climax of the story, and so it explaining everything, it made sense. This being unsolvable in Sister Location and then explained in FNAF 6 is fine. So it's at this point that I think we're able to solve CRMN_INST. But I want to walk you through how we were able to solve it. I was actually analyzing another blueprint from FNAF 6 when I figured out the answer. One of FNAF 6 blueprints is of something called Rasque. R-A-S-C. FNAF 6's map is actually a big labyrinth. Henry designed it to trap the evil animatronics, your lefties, your scrap babies, your Williams, your molten Freddies, inside of it. Henry explains that they're being lured around by the sounds of children parties. They're always so near, and yet they can never find them.
Into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach.
They're lured using Rasques. Rasques simulate happy children to lure the monsters in different directions. Rasque stands for Remote Activated Simulated C. What is C? It's obviously children. There's no reason for Scott to have not spelled this out to tell us that C meant child, but I guess Scott has his reasons. So armed with the knowledge of what actually happened in Sister Location, armed with the knowledge of what the scoop is, and the way that Scott writes his abbreviations and acronyms, let's look back at CRMN-INST. Let's start with the word project. What project would have been the third priority for Circus Babies? You have supplying things for Chica's Party World, you have renting out their animatronics, and then you have William's secret plan of kidnapping children to obtain Remnant to then inject into his robots to bring them to life in some sort of effort to bring his kids back, to put them back together. So his secret project would be his Remnant harvesting project. CRMN being in all caps and INST not being in all caps leads me to think that one of them is an abbreviation and one of them is an acronym. That's actually why criminal institution never made any sense to me. Why would criminal be capitalized and institution not be? Why is institution the beginning of a word, but criminal is just the full word but missing some letters? INST could mean institute, but it could also mean installation, instruction, or instrument. But CRMN, I think I was able to solve by looking at the Rasque blueprints. I think the C stands for child, or children. I think it's children RMN. And when I see RMN as an abbreviation in FNAF, specifically in Sister Location, I'm pretty sure that it's a slam dunk thing to say RMN is an abbreviation of Remnant, Child Remnant Installation Project, or Child Remnant Instrument Project, the instrument being the scooper. The specifications don't really matter. These are the three things that the Sister Location does. Supplies robots for Chica's Party World, rents out their animatronics for birthday parties, does its child remnant experiments. Could we have solved this before the word remnant had ever left Matthew Patrick's lips? No. Was it reasonable to assume that Scott would write an acronym this way and CRMN would be child remnant before we learned how he wrote acronyms like Lefty, Scoop, and Rasque? No. Is it really clear in hindsight that CRMN, in the context of William's project and Sister Location, means child remnant? Yeah, I think so. This list was a tease for the game. It was a signpost showing us the way to what the game was trying to say. It made sense before the game came out for us to wildly speculate about what it might mean, because we had no direction. If you see a sign in the fog that says a hill ahead, you might get lost on your way to the hill. But if you see a sign that says hill ahead and the fog has faded, you'll conclude that the sign is pointing toward the hill. But if you see a sign in the fog that says hill ahead, you can't see the hill, so you leave and then you come back a few years later, you climb the hill, you come down the hill, you see the sign again, and you say, oh, did we ever solve that sign? And someone goes, yeah, it means there's a secret hill around here. And you go, oh, there's a secret hill around here. Well, it can't be the hill that I just climbed down because that one wasn't very secret. Let's go look for the other secret hill. Well, then you're acting kind of silly. The fact that there's never been a criminal institute or a crewman installation or someone named Carmen, which is another theory about what this means, in the 9 years since Sister Location, but we do know that the game is about a child remnant instrument, is all that I personally need to know to say that we have actually solved this. But if you go into threads where people are discussing this mystery, the answer that people will give to the question, did we ever solve this, is, yeah, it means criminal institute. It's just been the answer for so long that people think it's solved. That solution made sense for the few months before Sister Location was released, and then when the game came out, it became an almost incoherent answer. There never was a criminal institute. In the entire series, there is yet to be one, but it's so embedded in the community that people don't see it as something worth questioning. People checked it off their list of things to solve 9 years ago, and so whenever they revisit it, they go, oh yeah, we already got that one. Let's not even look into it again, check. The more I look into the franchise, the more I see things that are settled debates that actually have very, very shaky foundations. I don't blame people who don't study this franchise as their job for believing some of these things, because I believe some of these things, and researching this fandom is my job, but I think that sometimes we have to fight against community consensus. In FNAF 6, there's a place called Junior's in the minigame Midnight Motorist. This is theorized to be a diner, a bar, or a Freddy's location. Most of the time, people will say that it's actually the FNAF 2 location. This isn't settled lore, but in my experience, most people seem to think that it's a bar. But there's a whole fan game franchise called Junior's, based on the interpretation that Junior's and Midnight Motorist is a Freddy's location, a spin-off. If a casual fan who might have been a child when FNAF 6 came out thought it was confirmed that Junior's is a Freddy's location, which is a reasonable thing to assume and something that people do actually believe, they might think that this is consensus or confirmed because there's a whole fan game called Junior's. And I wouldn't blame them for thinking that. And so I want to use this video to say that anything you've ever been told by someone talking about FNAF, including me, that you haven't investigated yourself, shouldn't be seen as an answer. If two FNAF experts can debate and disagree about facts of the franchise, then I think it's very silly to just read someone on Reddit saying something and take it in as a correct answer. Remember to always be critical of easy answers and things that are just believed because they have been established for such a long time. Also remember to be Freddy. Freddy stands for friendly, respectful engagement, discussion, and discourse that yields success. Remember to be nice to each other in the comments, consider supporting the creators you admire, like buying my merchandise, and never lose sight of the things that are important to you. And remember that CRMNINST stands for Child Remnant Installation. Although I never liked the word installation there because it's more like injection, not installation, and it could be instrument. But I've also never seen the scoop referred to as an instrument, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an even better answer out there. Maybe you can solve this in the comment section, or in your own FNAF video.